during a near-death experience, we have all of our memories flash before our eyes. We essentially experience everything we've ever experienced in life all in one moment, in this kind of overwhelming flood of memory and experience. We also have an empathetic response to those memories. So we're feeling everything that we've made others feel during our lives.
Welcome back to the Consciousness of the Way. Very excited to welcome to the podcast Dr. Gregory Shushan, who's a historian, a teacher of ancient wisdom, transcendence, really. I mean, this is where we've sort of come to a place where people don't realize how much things have changed in the evolution of consciousness, where we're at today, something that was so not understood by any stretch of the imagination, but history has shown us that there's an entry level to this type of mastery. If not by accident, hopefully you come back to remember. I want to welcome to the podcast. How are you, my friend?
I'm good, thanks. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Yes, this is an exciting time. I love to speak with people like yourself that are able to delve really deep into history. And sometimes that history discovers things that were sort of stumbled across or upon or put aside that we didn't have any idea there was some type of ledger or a logged point in time where this sort of stuff took place, right down to human history. It's never what you think it is. Yeah. So I'd love you to just start with sharing with the audience more about your journey, how you got to this point and discovered that it's just like every day is Christmas for you, I imagine.
Yeah. Some days I get coal in the stocking, but So I started out in Egyptian archaeology. This was at University College London at the Institute of Archaeology there. And I was always kind of interested in things like near-death experiences. And as a kid, I had all these books about the paranormal and ghost hunters and all this kind of stuff, but never really took it that seriously. I just thought it was interesting. And part of my interest was, wow, isn't it amazing all the weird things that people believe? So that was all kind of lodged in my mind. I'd even read a book by Carol Zaleski called Otherworld Journeys, which is a comparison of medieval European afterlife journeys of monks and nuns in comparison to near-death experiences. So that whole idea that there could be this, that near-death experiences aren't just like some modern New Agey phenomena that were invented with Raymond Moody in 1975. The idea that they could have been happening in medieval Europe kind of fired my imagination, but really just in a casual reading sort of way. So kind of fast forward, and I was studying Egyptian archaeology, and part of that course was learning Egyptian languages, the hieroglyphs in Middle Egyptian. And in the course of that, I was reading some of the earliest accounts of descriptions of the afterlife, of what the afterlife was like. And these were ritual texts that were recited over the corpse to kind of facilitate the journey of the spirit from the mummy into the other world. And as I'm reading them, I'm thinking, this actually sounds familiar, even though the mummy isn't coming to life again, the soul doesn't return. The journey, the leaving the body, entering to darkness, coming out into a realm of light, meeting deceased relatives, meeting a being of light, having an evaluation of their life on earth, having different barriers that they have to pass through. There's even a part where the deceased kind of encounters their own corpse, which I kind of saw as like an out-of-body experience. They meet the corpse of the god Osiris, who's the god of the dead in the other world, but they're constantly told, you are Osiris. So basically it's meeting their own corpse, and then that God is also the god of judgment, so it's self-judgment. So there are all these kind of layers of similarities, both thematically and descriptively, that made me think, could they have been basing some of these ideas on near-death experiences? And then that snowballed, and 25 years later, here I am.
Amazing, absolutely amazing. Because I mean, I understand. I teach people ancient rituals that have been handed down from generation to generation for thousands of years, and through two lineages of Taoism.
Hmm.
It is very much a lived, embodied experience that becomes extremely visceral.
Hmm.
As you learn to harness and cultivate your skills, it becomes palpable,
Hmm.
because you're literally playing with what some alchemists would refer to as turning lead into gold, and you are starting to meld this thing, energy potential, into possibility. But there is a path, a rite of passage that must be met.
Hmm.
And so everything you're saying, you had me at hello, because these are all within the deep understanding of these type of, like, I'm going to go beyond belief systems, because it's a
Hmm.
knowing as you get to experience it before you even enter into that right right of no return,
Hmm.
where you leave the body and then go off into some other experience.
Yeah.
So through your research, what have you been able to verify for yourself, so you don't feel completely insane, that there's sense to this, right?
Um, yeah. So what I did was, once I had that idea, I thought, okay, the only way to, because believe it or not, in ancient Egypt, this culture that was, people say obsessed with death, they were very much preoccupied with the afterlife. There are no accounts of near-death experiences in ancient Egypt. All of the writing was used for official purposes or priestly ritual kinds of purposes, these religious texts. So I thought, how can I kind of figure out if there really is a near-death experience underlying this? And I thought maybe the way to do that is through cross-cultural comparison. What other civilizations out there, how did their afterlife beliefs emerge? Are they also similar to near-death experiences? So I did this kind of insane, actually, project comparing ancient Egyptian afterlife texts with ancient Vedic Indian afterlife texts. That was kind of the first phase. And then I expanded it to include pre-Buddhist China, um, ancient Sumer and early Akkadian Mesopotamia, and then Aztec and Mayan civilizations. And the reason I chose them was because they were all kind of culturally separate from each other for the most part. They emerged separately. So there couldn't really be an argument that, well, the, Aztec beliefs are similar to the Egyptians because they, diffused from ancient Egypt all the way across the world to Mexico. Like that just didn't happen. Um, so we know that the myths and the beliefs emerged in the places where they actually emerged, and there's no alien component either. Just to get that out of the way, no evidence for an alien component. So what I found was that indeed, yes, the afterlife beliefs in all of these ancient civilizations shared those kind of a few basic core elements of the near-death experience, 9 of them specifically, which happened to be the ones I mentioned earlier: leaving the body, entering darkness, coming out into a realm of light, meeting a being of light, meeting deceased relatives, having an evaluation of your earthly life, encountering a border or a barrier, and seeing the body, oftentimes some kind of encounter with your own corpse. And the ninth is feelings of transcendence and unity and kind of transformative effects of the experience. So I started thinking that's a little bit too similar to be coincidental, especially the fact that they're occurring in this set of circumstances. If it was just one or two across cultures, that would be one thing, but it's, these core components of an NDE. So I thought that probably is a reasonable explanation. And then on top of that, what I didn't expect to find were actual accounts and evidence of near-death experiences in all of the civilizations except for Egypt. Like there are actual accounts. Some are in medical texts, some are in religious texts. But in each of these civilizations, we have stories of people who died, went to the other realm, had all these experiences, came back to life, and then that story was integrated somehow into their religious or spiritual beliefs.
Wow. I mean, it seems to be the main thing on the menu these days. If someone is speaking of spiritual journeys, or I'm on my spiritual journey, it's very much everything you're speaking on is a cause and effect relationship when I teach people how to enter through what we call the passage from the pulse of the mother all the way down to the body.
Mhm.
It is the same effects
Mhm.
and how they animate each other
Yeah.
with the direct source.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And my, I don't want to say supposition, it's not that strong, but my speculation is that with traditions like yours, with shamanic traditions, meditational traditions in Hinduism, in Buddhism, whatever, um, where did the knowledge of these kinds of experiences and altered states come from? And I kind of think maybe they came from spontaneous experiences of people dying and coming back to life and saying, wow, I had this amazing experience. And then the priests and shamans saying, that's fantastic. How can we replicate that? Or even people becoming shamans by virtue of having had that experience. That's often the case. In fact, I see that in a lot of Australian Aboriginal accounts, where they didn't really make a distinction between a near-death experience and a shamanic journey to the other world. So in my another study I did, which was comparing near-death experience in indigenous small-scale societies around the world, traditional religions, I was very confused because everywhere I was finding descriptions of NDEs, and then I got to Australia, and I didn't find any. And I'm, looking and looking and looking at all these 19th century accounts of these explorers and missionaries and anthropologists, and I'm finding journeys to the other world, but none of them have the death and return sort of context. And finally, I realized it's because they didn't really care about the context. The important thing was the journey, and the important thing was the status it conferred upon the person who had the journey. So they were basically seen as a shaman because they had this experience. So, and then the effects that the experience had, both on the individual and then the knowledge that they learned in the other world that they could then teach to the community, those were the significant things. They didn't really care about evidence for an afterlife the way we're obsessed with in the West.
Yeah, I still feel there's a group consensus of manipulation of what is the end result and how they obtain that result, because there's a certain type of experience where people have this I'm being given a review, and then I'm sitting down and I'm talking with my soul, and it's a little contrived. It's more like someone is reading off a script and they really want it so badly, yet they haven't obtained it. This is within Taoism, we refer to that as the undulating flame. It's elusive. You reach for it, but then it disappears.
Right.
And this is kind of like what happens when you're not given the foundational understanding of how to be present in that stream. And it's a system, a method of cultivation, so you can nurture the physical body and then truly encapsulate and expand to everything at once, so that you're able to truly access what we call the primordial mother, which is the magnetic force that animates everything in this material space. Yet most people are stuck with that idea of the spirit being outside and it has to come back in, or you leave your body. And it's really almost like an extension of a tentacle of, perhaps even like, if you visualize it as an octopus, there's these tentacles. It's your body's just one lens that you can look through when you craft that mastery, and you can be in everything at once. Your access is all knowing, yet there's this apprehension because little trickster like processes like psychology make it such that you separate yourself, and that's part of the contention of that path. When you want to really embody it, you're stuck with all these different processes that you have to analyze something that can merge with your intuitive state. It can be useful, but it has to be unified. then logic and introspective thought processes can be of value when they're supercharged with that intuitive stream. So when you're just acting on your intellect, it's bankrupt. It is corrupted, and it will always give you diminished return. You're never going to get, you want to get to the other side, as Jim Morrison would say, break through to the other side, but merge the two together, and then you supercharge your intellect with this powerful knowing. And that's the process is. I think, many people, through your own research, you would find that they stumble across it. I mean, my first encounter with it was when I was 2. I died and came back. And then again, when I was 8, I was hit by a car head on.
Wow.
And I died and came back for 40 minutes. I observed my mother, like, just mourning my death, my lifeless body.
Wow.
And then it wasn't until, and I was floating around like Peter Pan. It was an interesting apprenticeship that was given to me as a child, because I was engaged with just the imagination and left with my own devices. It's like this unity that we're having right now is what some of my parapsychologist friends would call, pyrokinesis or psychokinesis. So you're feeling into this stream of energy. You get a charge. I experience it. I see your auric field oscillate. These are all just mastered skills that everyone can have. They just have to go through the method. This is where people I always tell people, I know you love the idea of traumas and triggers, and you've been given this little rule book of how you're supposed to decipher this stuff. But in this space, it's all energy. So that means that everything is a diminished return. It's not a permanent like the pulse. And so the pulse, you are eternal, you are immortal. When that is realized, you move all the transitory impermanent stuff out of the way, thoughts, feelings, and emotions. Your participation is not required. And that's when people wake up and their eyes open and like, what? And you can do it right now. And it doesn't require you throwing yourself in front of a bus. Yeah. Some people feel like sleep paralysis. I'd love you to speak on that, because that is an entry level to this level of consciousness. Yet I feel like it's overdone and blown out of proportion and not necessary to acquire it. But some people are like, I need to go that death route.
Yeah, sleep paralysis is an interesting parallel to NDEs, because David Hufford is a sociologist. He's one of the earliest people. I think he actually came up with the name sleep paralysis. He's the one who named it in a book called The Terror That Comes in the Night. It's from 1982, but it's still relevant and still a really good read, actually. He kind of discovered that this experience happens cross-culturally, that all around the world people have this experience where they're in this, just in case anybody doesn't know what sleep paralysis is, you're in this kind of half sleeping, half awake state, which they call the hypnagogic state, but you're convinced that you're actually awake. So it's not really a lucid dream, because your brain is tricking you into thinking you're awake rather than into knowing that you're asleep and dreaming, which is what a lucid dream would be. And then while you're in this hypnagogic state, thinking that you're awake, but you're really dreaming, you feel this pressure on your chest. You feel some kind of malevolent presence in the room. You can't move, you can't scream out. So you actually are paralyzed. And part of what makes it so real is that they usually take place in the room where you're actually sleeping. So it's actually the setting of your space is completely recreated in the most realistic 3D virtual reality that your mind can manage, which is pretty good. But then the identity of the being that's holding you down differs according to your culture. And that was kind of David Hufford's really key, important discovery. So in Newfoundland, they have this tradition about an old hag. In Japan, it's a certain kind of hungry ghost. Somewhere else, it might be some kind of demon. So the fact that the experience is the same, but that particular element is culturally interpreted, raises a lot of questions, because does that mean that the person has the experience, and then when they talk about it, in order to make sense of it, they say, oh, and this old hag or this ghost was sitting on my chest? Or did they really experience it in real time during the experience as a ghost or an old hag? And that's kind of exactly the same problem with a lot of near-death experiences, because they have all those kind of 9 elements of similarity that I mentioned, and sometimes even additional ones, but they're very much experienced from the cultural, psychological, sociological, even makeup of the person having the experience. Like once we're out of the body, or once we're in that state, or whatever the ultimate nature of an NDE is, it doesn't mean that you're stripped of all of your enculturation and all of your history and memories. You're still who you are, at least for a period of time. So that experience is filtered through all of that cultural, symbolic, religious conditioning, or whatever. And just a quick example of that is people encounter the being of light. Some people will say, I saw Jesus. Some people say, I saw the Buddha. Some people, they saw Muhammad or whoever. So again, did they really see those figures, or is that how they interpreted them? And that's a question that I think is unresolved, if not unresolvable.
Yeah, it's always, I always notice these identities within anyone's auric field, as I'll look at someone and go, oh, you have a very, fond relationship with Jesus and God. Like, how do you know that? I'm just seeing it in your field. Now, I mean, measuring that is part of the clairsense cultivation and conditioning within Taoism. We refer to this under a blanket of what we call transformational skills. And that one of the transformational skills with many goes and exceeds anything that you would consider, the 5 senses. I mean, that's really just the basement level understanding of this material state. And then you really pop the top off it, and your ability to access information is unlimited when you're able to cultivate to that level, which requires the understanding of the metaphysics, which is everything is energy. So how do you enter into this so-called ether? It requires a fundamental conditioning. So you start with something that will evoke the awareness of the energy and its vibratory, frequential, and ultimate resonance. How you are able to ascend is to maintain that resonance for you to enter into different states of consciousness, or remember who you are. But it will be extremely volatile and vibratory, and it will be through the body. It's kind of like, that if you've ever seen that movie, Towering Inferno, long time ago, one of my favorites, and a woman's running around absolutely out of her body, screaming, we're going to die, we're going to die. And then Robert Wagner grabs her and slaps her across the face. Get a hold of yourself. And she's like, oh, thank you, I needed that. Okay, let me go and help someone. It's the same type of thing. You have to interrupt the pattern. And this is where people get sort of like, okay, well, what does that mean? And that the most advanced technology is entering that primordial state. To detach from your physical body is the breath itself. There's nothing more powerful than that. And when you enter into that gateway, the second you do something as simplistic as pause your breath, you are separating from your body immediately. And people dismiss that. They're like, that's ridiculous. I give them an exercise. They go, holy shit, is this real? Yes, it is. And people dismiss something because it's just within the wheelhouse of, I look in the mirror and this is the body and the mundane reality and 9 to 5. And guess what? I've been given my mandate. I work, I retire, I buy a house, and then I die. People aren't happy with that anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, I think there's been a subset of people who never have been throughout history. Whether that's growing, I don't know. Hopefully.
And so when you look at these correlation between indigenous practices, what do you find? Are you now at a point where you want to discover people that are claiming they're experiencing these things now, as opposed to something that is just ancient in its nature? Do you spend a lot of time talking to people that claim they've had these experiences?
No, I don't. Partly because a few reasons. One is that, I'm a historian, so that's kind of I didn't come at this area from parapsychology or psychology or anything in the present world. It was really history of religions, and anthropology and archaeology and Egyptology. So So for one thing, that's kind of where my interest and expertise lie. For another thing, almost all of the research in near-death studies has been on modern contemporary people, living people who are able to tell their stories, people in cardiac arrest wards who wake up and tell the doctors about what happened to them. So I kind of feel like what I'm doing is contextualizing the modern accounts in the kind of history of people. I'm kind of trying to do like the world history of near-death experiences across cultures, partly to show that this really is an experience that's a human experience that happens everywhere and in basically every culture. It doesn't matter what you believe. It doesn't matter what your demographic group is or what period in history you lived. Um, so that's, I'm trying to kind of have that serve as a corrective to near-death studies and also to the history of religions, religious studies, especially because all the theorizing that's being done in near-death studies is kind of based around this Western stereotypical NDE that kind of doesn't really exist. so I'll give, in addition to the example about the different identity of the being of light, there's another good one about the life review. So this idea that during a near-death experience, we have all of our memories flash before our eyes. We essentially experience everything we've ever experienced in life all in one moment, in this kind of overwhelming flood of memory and experience. We also have an empathetic response to those memories. So we're feeling everything that we've made others feel during our lives. So it's this kind of grand moralistic sort of lesson. Yeah.
The moral compass exists. I always remind people the universe doesn't have a moral compass, but hey,
yeah. So that notion of a panoramic life review is often interpreted as evidence of the dying brain and a kind of materialist explanation for near-death experiences. So in recent, there's been a few recent discoveries in near-death studies where they got an EEG reading of a person's brain at the moment of death, and they found that just as the brain is physically switching off, there's a burst of electromagnetic energy. And they were able to also identify this in rats. So they could tell that rats also have this burst of energy right at the moment of death. So the scientists then take the massive leap and speculate after that. That's responsible for the life review because all the barriers in the brain, the physical brain, are being short-circuited, and there's no longer any kind of compartmentalization of the brain. So you experience all the memories that you've ever had at once. So if that were the case, we would expect that kind of experience to occur cross-culturally, but it actually doesn't. So in almost no historical or cross-cultural near-death experience do we have descriptions of life reviews like that. We do have a lot of descriptions of people having some kind of moral evaluation of their life. Maybe there's a great Native American example where there's a Native American man having an NDE, and he goes into this room where there's a man sitting behind a desk, and on the wall behind that man there's a photograph of the person having the NDE, and he goes and looks at the photograph, and he feels that embodied within that picture is his whole life's experience. So kind of thematically it's similar, but it's totally different from a panoramic life review if your brain was being shut off. So the significance, the importance of that distinction is that if people are theorizing about the nature of an NDE and they're saying it's all in the brain and it's all because the brain's being shut off, how do you then explain the differences cross-culturally between that life review, between the identity of the being of light? And at the risk of rambling on too much, I'll give another example because it's a really interesting one. In the West, when people are sent back to the body during the near-death experience, it's often because they're told, it's not your time to die. You need to go back to life to care for your loved ones. You need to finish writing your book, your PhD, or you need to spread the word about near-death experiences. You need to tell people that death is not the end. Some kind of personal, individual reason like that, a self-development or community development reason. Whereas in a lot of other cultures, in ancient Greece, in some Indian, China, Japan accounts, the reason for being sent back is a case of mistaken identity. So they will say, we got the wrong Gregory Shushan. We wanted the one who lives in upstate New York. So get back to your body. So I'd wake up in my body. This other person who happens to have my same name will then die permanently because it was, an accounting error on behalf of the spirits in the other world. So being sent back is the same, returning to life is the same, the journey is the same, but the reason for being sent back is totally different and obviously very cultural. How to explain that, I'm still not totally sure. So.
Well, I mean, whenever I teach someone this level of mastery, which is, Shen projection, which Shen means spirit, within Taoism, it's just a matter of understanding the metaphysics. And people go, oh, really? If I understand the metaphysics, I thought it was a lot more sexy and mysterious than that. It can be. It doesn't have to be, but let me give you the fundamentals so you can show yourself evidence, because the evidence is part of the experience and that makes it true to you. So other than that, it's just rambling, information, and you don't sit with it. It doesn't, you're not emulating the same resonance for it to actually materialize into something that is valid by you. And so when I teach someone how to do that, you're leaving this space and ascending through everything, and they experience it the same way. And ultimately there's what we would consider a veil as an optic perception of things, and once they pierce that veil, it's void. It starts with a phosphorus white light, and then you enter void. And for anyone that's using this practices, you go through this stage, and quite frankly, it refers to what we call the great bellows, where everything is contracting and expanding. So there's always a creation, a completion, and then a rebirth. That's the cycle of everything within a Taoist path. So then when you pierce that veil, you enter phosphorus white light, and then straight into darkness, which is that magnetism. Now, between the two is where you can sprout off and create anything that you desire in another experience. But the people are like, oh, that sounds so boring. I'm like, well, we're never mixing with, this godlike voice that says, you have made a mistake. You must return to Department C. That's not happening. It's very much about where you're at in your own experience, and then the tradition is to through transformational skills, so that you are conditioning yourself through your path of alchemy, through your natural born life. You are constantly conditioning yourself for that moment, that so you can step out, and there's no fear. There's nothing associated with, because you're able to do it at will. And so there's a celebration for anyone that does meet that. For the hundreds of times I've transitioned people, you witness the energy leave the body, and there is that crescendo, that peak point where we call it the Bai Hui. You leave from the top of the head, and this is very fundamental within the mechanics of the metaphysics. Yet, people are, and it's a celebration, so you can be hand in hand with that person as they go up the roller coaster, and they're going to the top, and it becomes extremely powerful. And it's not a materialistic in lack of, I'm mourning the loss of, now what don't I have in my life? It's not the fact that this person is now moving on. It's, oh my goodness, I've lost my grandma, my father, my brother, and what is it doing to me? It's so self-absorbed. It's so typical of a Western culture. You become separate. Have you found that?
What I have found is, one of the explanations for why these panoramic life reviews don't exist in other cultures is exactly that, because we're such a highly individualistic, self-obsessed society. Everything's all about me, how is this person dying affecting me, rather than like, oh, that poor person's dying. So the speculation, actually, I think first theorized by Alan Kelly here, who's an Australian sociologist who's worked a lot in NDEs and end-of-life studies in general. He speculated that the reason in small-scale societies, such as in Australia and New Zealand, that they didn't have life reviews is because of them being a more community-based society in general. So the idea of a personal life review is not really even relevant, because really they're just part of the community, and they're not going to have a community life review. You can have a personal life review on behalf of the entire community. And I think that makes a lot of sense, because the societies where I didn't find anything like that, not even a kind of evaluation of their life, let alone a full-on life review, were kind of small-scale community-based societies. So I think, I think there's definitely something in that.
Well, that correlates with what we call the Great Bellows, which is the nature of reality, which you're contracting and expanding at the same time. You're all things and nothing at the same time. So your life review would be everything. That you are all things. So it's not a matter of, a self-absorbed, blip in someone's human experience that has a title to it, where this is Mary Jane and this is what happened to her from birth to death. That is so, again, it's not, it's a self-absorption that is not what we refer to as the selfishness to the selflessness requires the sacrifice. And that sacrifice is realizing that your personal signature within this journey has nothing to do with who you really are. It's like just you're eating ice cream that's chocolate today. The next time it'll be vanilla. And people cannot deal with that. Am I not important? Of course you are. But it's just it's a story. That's it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't amount to anything more or less than that. So experience it and enjoy it. The key is that mastery while you're present, that you don't end up like Steve Jobs going, oh, it's so much brighter than I thought it was in the last 5 minutes or 5 seconds of his life, as opposed to someone that can truly condition and play with that and get so much out of it that it goes back to ancient, community-based stuff, where you have an elder that is a keeper of this ancient wisdom teaching and continually shares it through generations. And then there's that next person that, and you could say that maybe, history is being erased, and that ability to do that in a community because of things like the interweb and AI and things like that. And I would trust AI about as far as I could throw it, because the world is made up of a bunch of psychopaths. So they're just accumulating more psychotic episodes that they're now infusing, and then now they're claiming they put a label on it, spirituality. Ask it any question, it'll give you the answer. A little dangerous, in my opinion. I don't know.
For sure, yeah. But I think there's also obviously a psychological component to near-death experiences, or any kind of mystical experience, where, as you said, without the kind of preparation for what the experience is going to be like, then who knows on what tangent your consciousness is going to guide you or lead you. So if you did leave a life where you're super introspective, and this is, to put a more positive spin on it rather than self-obsessed, if you're introspective and you're genuinely curious about, why am I here? What is the point of this existence? Am I on part of like a continuum of rebirths? What is the nature of the afterlife? What's going to happen to this consciousness that I call me? Am I just part of, a meat robot, or am I going to survive the death of my body? So those are all very self-interested questions in a way. So if you have that kind of introspection, even if it is kind of metaphysical, it still then makes sense that when you have a life review, when you go into the afterlife, you're going to have a life review, because you're going to be wanting to process everything that ever happened to you. And if you look at it in terms of reincarnation, then it's kind of processing the life you just had in order to kind of put that in the context of your Atman, your individual unchanging self, and the previous lives that you had, and the next life you're going to go into, or if you're going to reach liberation or whatever. So I guess I'm just saying it in a sense of it doesn't have to be seen as a kind of a judgment on a Western way of thinking. To put a more positive spin on. I guess I'm looking for a way of respecting the diversity of the experiences without putting that kind of label on it. But I do think that our state of mind when we're having that experience is definitely going to guide what the experience is going to be like. Very similar to a lucid dream.
Yeah. I mean, that to me, it's about their ritual and connection with source is an Eastern natural breathing practices through culture.
Mm-hmm.
It is not so much so outside of the Beatles dropping some acid and singing a bunch of stuff back in the 60s,
Mm-hmm.
and then some wisdom teachers that have come out from India and other parts of the Eastern world teaching, even back in the 1940s and 50s. It's met now with meditation and yoga are two classic ways to obtain some level of awareness. And I think that what's important is that everything, remember, when you dismiss someone else's belief system, you dismiss your own.
Mm-hmm.
I always remind people there's a million ways up the mountain. You craft your own reality. But when people are like so obsessed, well, why am I here? And my answer is, why not?
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh my goodness, this is crazy. But then you experience it from a physicality level, because that's the lowest level to get access to this awareness. You must master the energy potential of what people call the dimension, the realm, whatever you want to call it. We refer to it as material.
Mm-hmm.
And once you master that, then you can continue. If your curiosity leads you, then you will continue to want to follow that path, just as you have followed your path. And it's led you to all these incredible discoveries that help people with that information to decipher their own experience. And I think that, that's that thing where, that for anything to do with anything I teach, it's a celebration.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you master it while you're breathing, while you're animated physically, then you get excited when it's the time for you to move to your next experience, instead of spending most of your natural born life in fear of it,
mm-hmm.
which is that can be problematic, because it decays and diminishes the body, and then you really don't experience, in my opinion, your maximum potential.
Mm-hmm.
You're caught up in the fear of losing something, instead of being in that now moment, which is so critical. Have you found that with other practices?
Yeah, well, I know that a lot of people who have near-death experiences, there's a stigma surrounding them. So first of all, they're afraid to even talk about them, because they're afraid that people are going to say they're crazy, or their doctor's going to put them on anti-psych meds or whatever. But at the same time, even within the kind of near-death experience community, support groups and things like that, there's even judgment within those kinds of groups. So if somebody, maybe they weren't dead enough, maybe they didn't actually die for a period of time, maybe they just thought they were going to die, but they still had an NDE. But there's these kind of hierarchies of the category of how much they died, and then the content of the experience. Some people who have these experiences are troubled because they think, why didn't my wife or my husband or my mom or whoever meet me in the other world? Why was I met by somebody I didn't even know? Why wasn't I met by anybody? Just this being of light. Why didn't I have a life for you? So like there's this these expectations that people have. They put these conditions on the NDE that they're going to have, and when those conditions aren't met, they're weirded out. Instead of coming back from it thinking, wow, I survived the temporary death of my body, I discovered that there's some kind of survival of consciousness after death. They have personal experience of that. They sometimes these questions arising from their previous expectations get in the way, and a lot of that also happens from religious indoctrination. So if it's not like going to heaven and meeting Jesus, that troubles a lot of people. So there's this kind of toxic theology element that I'm hoping that the kind of research I'm doing is going to help people, as you said, understand their experience, put it in the context of, here's an experience type, but people around the world experience it differently, and there's no like single right way. You're going to get the experience that you get. Maybe you can help to steer that experience by practicing through meditational practices on Earth, or whatever other kind of experiential tradition you might be interested in. Maybe you can train your mind to recognize what's going on, and thereby, have a better experience when you actually die. But for the most part, you're not totally in control of every experience that you have, just like on Earth.
Yeah. I mean, that's where the method to the madness is so critical, and I believe Taoist alchemy is second to none,
Mhm.
because we have a very, very deep, intricate, sort of intimate relationship with the cultivator, and you become very mastered at this stuff. Just like if you put your attention to anything, the most valuable commodity is your attention.
Mhm.
With your attention and intention, you can be very mastered in this stuff, which helps others.
Mhm.
My teacher, who I channeled over 30 years ago, Lutzu, and I commune with him on a daily basis. And I'm not 3 cents short of $1, but I can sit and write an actual book of over 300 pages in about 4 hours. And
Wow.
people look at me and go, "Where did you find that?" Well, I'm as dumb as rocks, but he makes me look kind of intelligent, because when you access that flow state, which so many people are familiar with, we refer to it as Wu Wei,
Mhm.
effortless action, effortless effort, is accessing that primordial magnetism. And then everything is evident, everything is instant. And that's like a relationship that you have. So when I have a relationship with my teacher, Latsu, that I see as clearly as I see you and hear him as clearly as I hear you, I am not having a psychotic break. I haven't for 30 years. Now, many people that would come to me initially 30 years ago as a Taoist priest would be deemed as not balanced, and they're having a psychotic episode.
Yeah.
And then I would give them insight, and I would perform one of the many rituals that are taught to me as a priest. Some people would refer to this as an exorcism. It's a liberation of energy.
Mhm.
And so when you're liberating energy, you reclaim it and you return it to yourself. It's not being detoured or distracted by other constructs that you're forming within your own experience.
Mhm.
And so it will have a very visual effect of the body unraveling that energy. Now,
Mhm.
fast forward to today, and that same person will wake up and, have voices in their head, or they feel like they're having a break. Oh, I'm channeling the Palladians, and open up a YouTube channel and get 100,000 followers.
Mhm.
It changes, but I would always caution that person, because they're not getting the fundamentals. The very reason that most people go cuckoo is they invert that intuitive state, not balancing the energy potential. So they take too much of that in, and then it results in a physical transmutation that you will see visually, where they'll have struggling with their hormones, their physical regulation, maybe too much fat and not enough. There's many different things that will show themselves physically from inverting that amount of awareness and not balancing it out. And so then they end up breaking, because I'm a channeler, I'm a psychic, a medium, whatever you are feeding from your own energy, and it starts to consume you.
Mhm.
So then you have this deficient state, and most people burn out, or their mortality, their lifeline, is diminished rapidly, because they're using their own energy as opposed to tuning into their eternal internal state that cannot be created or destroyed. I think many people tend to associate that with energy. Energy is diminished. People will go, well, no, energy cannot be created or destroyed. No. The pulse, the magnetism is what cannot be created or destroyed. The energy is transitory and impermanent. And this is what you need to understand. That's what's constructing this reality. And it's like a firework. It's a wave. You shoot it off, it has a peak, and then it falls back into itself. And that's what thoughts, feelings, and emotions are. And so the more you harbor those, and I refer to it as be the arbiter of change, not the harborer of the same, which is the same behavior over and over again, then it becomes to transmute through the body, and then you create illness, which is part of, a more ancient sort of Chinese healing modality, you know, traditional Chinese medicine, which was derived from Taoist alchemy. So understanding how that absorbs into the body through this, you can show it through the energy and the liberation of it. And people can literally go from one extreme to another within a few moments by using that energy. I think a lot of people dismiss the simplicity of things, yet, you know, they have that opportunity to change. It's like your research, your information is so valuable to society today that more and more people need to be aware of these things and understand them, instead of walking through life in a secret society where they're afraid to mention what they're experiencing. And then it unfortunately ends badly. I mean, my teacher would say this: imagine you're like a grain of sand, asking the beach, what are we doing today? Fall back into the beach and be realized. And then people go, you can't make that stuff up. It's just, it is. It's like, it's very simplistic, yet it makes so much sense when you realize the bigger scope of things.
Yeah. And that's partly, you know, as far as, you know, why I look at the historical accounts and, you know, focus on the past. When I look at the time depth of the history that I'm looking at, you know, some of these Egyptian accounts are 2800 BCE. So we're talking thousands of years ago. And when I look at, you know, if I can imagine in my mind a timeline from then up until the present, and the examples of descriptions of the afterlife and near-death experiences of these individuals over time, we really are just, you know, momentary blips on the face of the planet. And we have, and it's, I think it's like this in every generation, in every era of world history, wherever you live and whatever time you live in, we tend to think of ourselves as special. So what's going on in America at the moment, people are justifiably, you know, pretty freaked out by it. But it is at the same time, it's no worse than what was going on in other periods of time in ancient Rome, or, you know, whatever other era of time that we're in. And I think there's a kind of exceptionalism that people have. And having that perception of the depth of history and our place in it. And then even beyond that, you know, the Earth's place in the cosmos, in the universe, it really does kind of give you a different perspective of, and a kind of humility about who and what we actually are, which in a way is a transcendent kind of, I think, approach to thinking of our existence. Some people find it really depressing and dismal, but I think I find it a little bit centering and comforting.
Yeah, I mean, you cannot, I mean, you look at history and you look at something like what's, you know, the chaos that's attempting to be resuscitated across America, which is just, you know, so benign, it's infantile. It'll die before it even starts, because it's an animated nonsense that's coming from people that are just pranksters, and they want to create disorder and anarchy. And it's just, the energy's not strong enough. People are not enough. These are all just sort of, they're catalysts, but they just don't transmit enough that it's going to it's going to have an event that's going to be a nationwide event. I can give you the heads up on this right now. Even though people are like, oh my goodness, you look at something. There's no, I mean, if you want to measure humanistic sort of like expressions, thoughts, feelings, and emotions, there is no courage coming from someone that wants to stand up or throw rocks at some type of authority here in America, as opposed to a man that will not bend to a regime like, let's say, 1989 in China, where that man stood in front of that tank, and it's all or nothing, baby. That community has been beaten down. You're looking at stuff like, you know, what's going on in America compared to China. I mean, there's levels of genocide in China that people don't even associate with, you know, they're talking about the tragedy within World War II. Any loss of life is a tragedy, because we have lost and disconnected the sentience and the empathy that is the superpower of the human beingness. And that's where most things go awry, is when people stop believing that that doesn't exist, or they're conditioned to detach themselves from it.
Mhm.
But every day to own a cell phone is the death of somebody in another part of the world. Yet, hey, I've got my Apple phone. I've got my,
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty absurd. And yes, this is my personality. I do not denounce it, because guess what? I like chocolate bonbons. I drive my side by side in the desert 100 miles an hour. And unfortunately, I still contribute to Netflix.
Mhm.
That doesn't require me as identity to witness miracles, manifestations, magic, things of that nature, is access through that eternal state of now that can be obtained by anyone. And you remember, you need a method of conditioning. Like anything, we start to absorb things, but there's still a conditioning that takes place, which is that cycle: stress, conditioning, and then expansion.
Mhm.
And everyone has that. You can apply it to any template, any path, anything you do will have those very fundamental ingredients. How do you experience your life?
Mhm.
And like you said, you were notioning, hey, let's make this a little bit more positive. Absolutely. Because it's like Oliver Twist and Oliver asking for more. You want more, boy?
Mhm.
Yes, sir. May I have another? Well, you're just mimicking what is being, put out. You're
Mhm.
receiving from, even from a beyond metaphysics, using a science lens of understanding deep within physics.
Mhm.
It's a fundamental access point. A lot of people are like, oh my goodness, I've discovered zeros and ones. Well, that must be the answer.
Mhm.
But I bring people to the attention of consciousness created the zeros and ones.
Mhm.
It's just another language that may not make sense to you if you put the lens of, a Hindu practice, or something that's very ancient like Taoism or anything like that. But you can go and look at it through the lens of physics and go, oh, I get it.
Mhm.
Furthermore, your contributions of, I don't even know how to make sense of it. And then they read your books and go, oh my goodness,
Mhm.
where have you been?
I hope so.
So very important. I mean, sleep paralysis is a thing that is a pet peeve of mine, because people believe that that's one of the only ways to access that. And you play this dance.
Mhm.
So by deconditioning the body, which is a natural course of action that you can implement through a certain exercise that you do before sleep,
Mhm.
and what we call the amber effect. And so the individual will literally start to accumulate energy through their sleep, which helps the body just completely dissolve in
Mhm.
that material state. And you will feel the expansion, where you are the bed, you are the room, you are the street, you are the neighborhood, you are the country, you are the universe. And it will be palpable, where
Mhm.
you can touch it and you can start accessing at will.
Mhm.
Where a lot of people feel like the conditioning only comes from near death. Well,
Mhm.
that near death it can be problematic if you just want to run out on the highway and see whether you get hit or.
Yeah, yeah, and there's actually examples of cross-culturally of shamanic practices where they actually bring about an actual near-death experience through violence, clubbing themselves or cutting off their circulation until they pass out, not just using chanting, drumming, meditation, drugs, but
like near death.
yeah, flatliners. Remember that movie?
Yeah.
That sort of thing, which I would never advocate. um, but yeah, and I didn't realize that people actually seek out sleep paralysis experiences. I think that's I had one myself, and I can't imagine anyone wanting to have that experience. I can understand, lucid dreaming or cultivating out of body type experiences or whatever, but yeah, sleep paralysis. Um, I guess because it's a challenge to overcome, to test your consciousness or something.
No, it's a stressor. It's just, to me, it's like all of a sudden, you paint a pig a different color, but it's still a pig.
Mm.
Yet you go through through time, history, right? We have ledgers and Taoist canons leading back past 6,000 BC, where, one of my teachers, the Yellow Emperor, was using things like oracle bone reading and pictographs to ledger all this information just nonstop. And so, it's all been done before. It's like that oscillating cycle. You breathe in and breathe out. That's why the primordial breath, when you obtain that energy, that exercise, and you master it, you're no longer breathing from the body. You're breathing from consciousness. And it's once again a conditioning. Ladies and gentlemen, everyone in the audience, it's a mastered conditioning which anyone can obtain. You just need to have the blueprint for it. And that's why the alchemical process for Taoists is so powerful, because you can drop it down in your reality and then have access to all these things that you thought were unobtainable. And that's where people get awry. They start with sleep paralysis, and that fundamentally, I've physically timed myself. I've been able to walk and not expend any energy nor draw from the body for over 18 minutes. Now, that's physically impossible on a biological aspect. Looking at the data, you would be brain dead at a certain period of time. Absolutely not. But it's a conditioning. And this is where, the evidence comes from your own experience. And you must be able to prove that to yourself, or it's just fleeting moments. And that's why the depth of information you've accumulated through all the things that you're researching as a historian is so potent for people, because things start to line up. I refer to this as the Sherlock to the Watson, elementary, my dear Watson. And you start to get incredible insight because it makes sense to you. And I mean, that's the part of merging the intellect and the intuitive states so that you can truly be an experiencer, which is such a powerful place to be. Instead of a consumer, you are a creator.
And there are, certain accounts of experiences that you can tell ring true and maybe have less cultural elaboration and literary elaboration on top of them, and then some that seem pretty fake. So I'm just thinking, there's an ancient Greek one of a man named Thespesius, and the description was that he saw all of the universe at once, as if his soul were a single eye looking at it, which that's a description that could be found in kind of any mystical spiritual text in the world. And it's those kinds of descriptions that I think they're almost ineffable, transcendent kind of experiences that in a way ring the most true to me, because they're not trying to put them in terms of gods or pre-existing beliefs. It's really just this personal experience of transcendence.
And making sense. Making some type of sense. You're trying to use the square peg to put it in the round hole, and it does. It's like when I Nigong, which is part of internal alchemy for Taoists, Nidan is the internal alchemy. So Nigong is activating your internal power, and from that you have a whole new definition of multitasking, because you can transmit an equal amount of energy potential to infinite amount of things. So then you're able to be in everything at once. And that is a really profound state that is so visceral, it's so kinesthetic, it's somatic. You feel it through the tuning fork. People are like, I leave the body, I don't feel anything. You are logging all of this. They're data points of information that make it real to you. And then you use this as a conditioning tool to validate the truth of it. And that's where people, I think, are misguided, and they lose sight of that, because it's an anchor. If you go up the ascended state through the metaphysics that I described, the body still is the entry-level origin of this experience as you continue to ascend. And it's like you still have to have this as an anchor, so that you are experiencing, logging it, and then validating it through a processes of conditioning, which many people just they're missing. That they jump the boat on the body part. I'm already ascended. I'm Jesus. I'm God. I'm Buddha, and I don't need that ridiculous body. And I mean, that goes with some traditions. Like
Mm.
Buddhism and Taoism are so fundamentally different, because Buddhists, most of my monks, 20 friends that I have that are Buddhist monks, and they're monastic, they have the same the same processes, that the body is an avatar, a throwaway. Now, there are other Buddhist practices that you might find that that's not the case. Every monk that I've ever come across has the same processes, where we're suffering what we call the dukkha. We just want to get rid of the dukkha, dissolving our karma and moving on to the next re-up, or maybe never returning to re-up. That this is part of our experience here on earth, which is supposed to be trial and tribulation and misery. Wash, rinse, and repeat. And this is where I go, well, Taoism is so different. And they're like, well, tell me, what is it? Well, Taoism is about encapsulating and emanating your immortality, your eternal state now in this lifetime. And so I refer to it as this. A Buddhist looks at life like a pile of crap covered in diamonds. They take up another diamond looking for more crap. They're like, the mundane, quickly, the suffering, I need to find more of it. And they'll continue to find it. Whereas a Taoist will look at life like a pile of diamonds covered in crap. We just dust off some more crap and find another diamond. And the answer is always the same. It's good to be me, which then I think really correlates with what you're experiencing when you're researching this historical process, that it does affect the individual's identity. Even though we refer to the identity as not being important, it still crafts their experience.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's interesting too about perceptions of the body, because a lot of people who have near-death experiences, including the cross-cultural historical accounts, in fact, quite a few accounts from Polynesia, 19th century and earlier, people are really disgusted about the prospect of returning to the body. And they look down at it and they think, what is that thing, that cold, dead thing? They don't even identify it with the self anymore. They feel like they've transcended it. And sometimes they're angry and disappointed that they're forced to get back into that body. And an interesting cultural twist in Polynesia, they enter through the big toe. You mentioned leaving the body through the top of the head. Polynesia, they re-enter it through the big toe. So it's and they're often forced to by the spirits in the other world, because they don't want to get back in.
Well, yeah, I mean, that refers to a dear friend of mine, Tom Campbell, who's a teacher of physics, and then he has his own My Big Toe, which is his theory of everything, which entails basically that, this is a virtual reality, that he has the receipts to show you that it's just a virtual reality, and everything else is a non-player character, an NPC. And you're crafting and creating probabilities with your attention intention, which falls in line with many Taoist practices, that is the very fundamental point of realization, is when you can become that emanated tapestry as detaching, crossing over a point of no return, we call it, where you don't collect $200 and you don't return, and then you attach as everything, which goes back to the great bellows. So every thought, every feeling, every emotion is an emanation of physical, energetic, and spiritual manifestation of divine word, will, light, love of the Tao, which then entitles us to be individual, but then have a perspective. But it only comes with that access. That means that you access anything and everything at once. And the paradox is you're all things and nothing at the same time, and people's head explodes. Never ending. It's like never ending. So with this research, have you ever been curious to want to evoke a near-death experience to get more sense of it, or you're good with just...
Yeah, I mean, I've had different experiences. I've had, meditational experiences and drug experiences and lucid dreams quite a lot, sleep paralysis. So no, I'm not in a hurry to to find out. But at the same time, I feel like I'm not really afraid of it either. I think, like most people, or a lot of people anyway, the fear is what I'm leaving behind, especially people, my dog. I don't want to die before my dog, for example, or my mom. So it's really that kind of material things that are upsetting to me about dying. Feelings, my body getting old and getting sick and suffering. That stuff is an issue for me. But as far as like life after death, or whether I'm going to survive the death of my body, or what's going to happen to me, that stuff doesn't really concern me at all. Because I figure, you know, either all the kind of mystics and near-death experiences are wrong, and it's going to be this amazing experience for a brief amount of time, and then I'm going to switch off. At that point, who cares anyway? Or they turn out to be right, and I'm fairly well equipped to navigate what's going to happen next, just because of what where my mind has been, what my research is focused on for the last 25 years or so.
Yeah, well, it just shows you how in tune with your superpower you really are. That's sentience and empathy. That empathy is really the superpower. Because what for conditioning purposes with the exercise, the ultimate for a Taoist seeker through the rites of passage is being dissolved of this attachment. Yet what happens is the default is servitude and selflessness. So you're in constant sharing. And so we refer to that as the gift is your offering. As you give, you receive, which keeps that animation and keeps that that immortal pulse active, nurturing the physical flesh. Because the age of diminished return within the physiology has changed dramatically just through science. Let alone if you continue to expand the way you perceive reality, that will nourish the body also. And so even I always tell people, as much kale as you want to eat or how many reps you get on a treadmill is not going to save you from your finite mind. That's the disruptor. That's the thing that will completely decay the body from the inside out, and you'll keep festering this stuff, and it will become your imminent demise and evidence of mortality. And it's I always one of the Taoist philosophies is remind the man who's never left the village, let him know he's seen the world. It's right here. It's right here. Doesn't get any easier than that.
Yeah.
And so, in review of how many books have you published so far, my friend?
I've done 3. Near-death experience in ancient civilizations. That's the most, the one that's out now. Near-death experience in indigenous religions was before that, and so they're obviously both very focused on, certain time periods and cultures, societies. And then I did one called The Next World: Extraordinary Experiences of the Afterlife, and that has some kind of summary of the other 2 books, but it also goes into mediumship and the way the afterlife was portrayed, especially in 19th century mediumship. The way spirits in the other world supposedly described what it was like there through mediums. And then there's also a chapter on reincarnation and reincarnation memories, mostly children who remember past lives, but specifically the state between lives and whether that state between lives is similar to near-death experiences cross-culturally or not. So it was all about kind of drawing together different kinds of supposed afterlife experiences and looking at them in light of near-death experiences and trying to figure out what's actually going on with all of these kinds of phenomena.
Yeah. I mean, it just shows your potential. It really does.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where the rubber meets the road when you want to be more specific in your own mastery. So, for example, creating healing is just wholeness. And so most people get caught up in channeling their angels and sitting in the lotus position and waving their incense. That's one form, and it's an entry level, but you start to realize none of those things are there, sort of like the trappings of a deluded state. When you really want to observe and be observing the observer, there is a moment where it's now. And you feel that transmuted state. It's as you mentioned, you had partaken in a few things that might be considered a psychonautics path. Did you use ayahuasca, mushrooms, anything of that nature?
Yeah, mushrooms, LSD.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there's that transmuted state. I teach people how to activate their DMT, and you will witness things transmute and return back to their original state, but it happens real time, and it's not a diluted episode that you're having. You watch the flesh reconstruct itself. Now, that seems absurd to many people, but I've been experiencing this for over 30 years and teaching people for 30 years. It's very real. And, Tom brings back that point where, for me to witness a healing, it happens in a second or two. And it's not me sitting here trying to call in the angels. No, it's an instant interrupt. So the probability changes with your attention intention. And from an alchemical perspective, all that we're doing is bringing a resonance that helps, that gives that potential to the object, place, person, or thing to return to its original state, the default state. And it has the moment to do that. And with that, miracles take place. People come out from comas. People are healed from some terminal disease. I mean, I've seen it all. Tumors, bones fuse, gashes closed before my very eyes, and I'm not taking anything. I literally went out of my way, as my childhood friends would indulge in LSD and mind-altering drugs, and most of them had a very diminished return before I was even 20 years old. Most of them had committed a form of self-offing themselves, if you know what I'm saying.
Wow.
And so I was absolutely staunch when it came to, I am not going to enter that. So when I first had my first meditation and I stopped sound for 20 minutes, I was mesmerized by the potential of superpowers, but also terrified that I had started the same fundamental cascade of being loony and then ending up in a state where I have no control. And that's really where, when you let go, you have no control. That's when you have control. That's the part of the part within Taoism that is so perplexing for people. It's like the second you let go, everything is materialized. Or from my teacher, the Jade Emperor, when you accept you know nothing, you know everything. That's a tough pill to swallow if you're spent your lifetime with a certain identity and you've invested all that time into it. To completely surrender that is a tough one.
Yeah, but then again, even not knowing is an identity. I'm saying that for myself because, as a scholar, historian, I don't really take the position about whether near-death experiences are really evidence for an afterlife or not, for an example. So I've kind of, and I don't want to, because I want my work to be taken seriously, both by academics and by experiencers and just by the general reading public and whoever, because I'm doing it in a kind of rigorous, systematic, scholarly sort of way, but trying to present it in a way that anybody can understand. But even that kind of adopting what I think of as, the early Christian mystical text, the cloud of unknowing. I feel like I'm dwelling within that cloud of unknowing, but then that becomes part of who I am, rather than somebody who believes in near-death experience or a skeptic against near-death experience, and that becomes perceived by both sides with a kind of measure of hostility. This guy's a parapsychologist. This guy's a loony, or this guy's a skeptic. He's never going to believe in what he's seeing before his very eyes. So you can't win.
Yeah, it's healthy to be able to play everything. That's like real emergence of consciousness. I mean,
it's open-mindedness, and I don't know. I mean, I can only know what I feel like I know, and what I've personally experienced or feel like there's irrefutable evidence for.
The absolute truth is your truth and only your truth. That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, I measured my brain waves for over 20 years, and every time I witness like transmutation back to its original state, it's between a 40 and 100 hertz. And so that, if you just water it down to just brainwave state, that is exhibited or referred to as a gamma brainwave, which means you have complete dominion over your consciousness, being able to access anything that was inaccessible within the unconscious mind. It instantly, you can erase things that might be triggers or traumas within a psychological state that can be completely, they're dissolved, and people step out of that, and they're like, "Holy crap! I've harbored this thing for, decades, and it no longer exists." And you get the same irrefutable evidence. 10 years later, I have the same person going, "I'm just so grateful that I found you to be able to resolve these issues." And it's like, all I'm doing is conditioning myself to show you what is possible, and you refer to that state. It's like a tuning fork. You hit one, and then the other one starts vibrating to the same tune. That's exactly what's going on here, and people make it so mystical. And it is, but it can also just be as simple as that. And I think the reason that when light workers and mediums and all these type of healers conduct themselves, and they claim that they've created miracles or things of that nature, and they don't sustain them. So the recipient or the initiate goes, "Oh, it happened," and then it's back again, because there should be a level of conditioning that takes place. And if you understand how to do that, they can hold that resonance for the rest of their life, instead of it just being one of those transitory, fleeting moments. "Oh my goodness, I feel this miracle. This happened," and you watch it deconstruct again. Or furthermore, if it's something really dense and slow, like a bone fusing or a tumor shrinking and things of that nature, when you condition them for this receiving of this resonance, because all it is you're hitting your tuning fork, they're able to hit theirs, theirs starts vibrating, and then you hold it. They hold it right there, and they're like, that's a lifetime of miracles that you're about to see if you show them how to condition. So I never ever go, "Oh yeah, first and foremost, I'm not doing anything. I'm just experiencing," even from the simplicity of neuroplasticity, you're having what they call a mirroring effect within the mirror neurons. You are just mimicking something you've already experienced. If you dumb it down to that, it seems kind of plausible. It's like, okay, I could digest that one. That kind of makes sense. I mean, you can use something as simple as a football game, and you're in the audience, and you feel the mind think, the group think that's created, because everyone becomes merged to that same point, and you feel the wave and oscillation of the whole crowd as you're sitting there. When I do this and you feel the energy flowing, you go, "Hang on a second, that's crazy. Why would he do this?" And you feel that through your body, because we're interconnected. It's just energy. But people want to, create this. You have some demonic force that's controlling your body, and that may very well. I always tell people, listen, anything that's transmuted or created within your field is your creation. So if you believe in the boogeyman and these type of low frequency energies, I refer to them as low frequency. That's it. You're still maintaining that resonance, but it's showing itself to you as such, because this is within your experience. This is what you've created. Not to be dismissed, but this is what you're hitting your tuning fork, and the tuning fork of that energy is showing itself to you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. A constant expression of self-realization.
Yeah.
So with that, I think, as Boys to Ben would say, we have come to the end of the road. You have an upcoming book that you're in the middle of crafting?
Yeah, I've got a couple. The next one is going to be near-death experience in ancient Greece and Rome, so classical antiquity. Left out of the other ancient civilizations book because of that cultural contact with other civilizations of the ancient Mediterranean that I mentioned. So, if there was it's obvious that the ancient Greeks had contact with Egyptians and other societies. So they weren't as kind of culturally isolated as the other ones. But I thought doing a deep dive into the way they talked about near-death experiences and described them would be interesting. And what, people don't realize, it's kind of been deleted from the history of Western culture. Some of the most prominent philosophers of ancient Greece wrote about near-death experiences. So Plato, Aristotle, Plutarch, they not just had accounts that they described, but they actually engaged with, what these meant metaphysically and philosophically. So I thought I would kind of bring these together and present them in a new sort of way, because it's been this kind of undercurrent in classics for a couple centuries. So that, and then eventually I've got a book I've been working on for years, which is just a historical anthology of near-death experiences from around the world, basically just the stories themselves, a couple hundred of them compiled into one big book. But that's somewhere down the line. But people can follow me on Patreon or wherever and get regular updates and keep in touch.
So how long until you release this book? Because I am extremely fun. It's like an obsession of mine. Ancient Greek history and Roman history are like.
That one will probably be first, but at least a year and a half. So.
Oh, you can't throw it into ChatGPT or something and just a little bit.
No, but I will be, I think, releasing a few draft chapters here and there. So
I would love that. I mean, that's my obsession. We could go deep into that. That should be for another episode. I would love that.
Sure, yeah.
Wow. Okay, I'm excited. Now you got me excited. Now you got the audience having to wait a year. Come on now.
I know I can't write these things fast enough, but
yeah. I mean,
they take a lot of research, a lot of going from one source to another, ancient, modern. So it's trying to figure out one particular little question. There's an ancient Greek example about a man who's having an oracular consultation. He's going to sleep in a cave to get this oracle pronouncement, and he's hit on the head, and then he has a near-death experience. So there's this, that context has been ignored throughout the classical studies, the near-death context. So I'm trying to kind of figure out why that's the case, and what kind of experience it really was. So even just one little thing can take a few weeks to really unpack and investigate.
Yeah, well, I'm excited. If you want an assistant,
Thanks.
Yeah, just let me know, because this is the stuff that gets me all warm and fuzzy. I was obsessed with it as a young boy, and that led me into just where I am today. But it never leaves me. It's something that I'm very fond of. So I'm looking forward to it, my friend.
Thanks.
I'm going to put your social sphere and interweb under this podcast, where people can find you to purchase your books. Is it through your website or Amazon? Where can we find the books for you to?
Yeah, I don't sell them personally. So through Amazon or Barnes and Noble or wherever you buy books, Books A Million, all those websites that should be out there.
Yeah,
so.
I refuse to bend my knee to the master. I would not publish anything through Amazon. I don't know what your agreement is, but it's basically a raping of intellectual property, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, this book is with Inner Traditions, the newest one. The one before that's with Oxford University Press. So it's out of my hands about where they're sold. But they should be available everywhere. And actually, the audiobook of the Ancient Civilizations one was just released a couple days ago. So if people want to listen to it, that option's there too.
Did you personally record it?
I didn't. No, I wish I had, but I wasn't given the option, unfortunately.
Oh wow. Okay. Well, I mean, AI can do that right now. I don't know whether you're familiar.
No, it's a real person who did it. I think he's their go-to guy for Inner Traditions books. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in the sense that they capture your speech.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And then you can they can have a full recording of you speaking it.
Yeah.
In about 10 seconds, which is horrifying to me.
It is. Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of scary.
It is.
If there's ever a recording that San Qing is claiming that he's a born again Christian, then that's definitely AI. Yeah. In closing, last question: what's your definition of spiritual consciousness?
Oh wow, it's a curveball. I would say this is a cop out, but my definition of spiritual consciousness is what ever anybody feels is their own experience of spiritual consciousness.
I love it. I love it. Over 400 podcasts, never got the same answer, because we're all a facet of the diamond of
Yeah.
perfection. So you say tomato, I say tomato, as it should be.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, one of the things that's emerged from my research is, as with, for me, any part of life, is the respect and appreciation of diversity. And that's individual, cultural, or whatever else.
Yeah. This has been fantastic. I really appreciate your time, my friend.
Thanks. Anytime.
I want to thank you. I want to thank the universe for bringing you into my life. I want to thank the audience for sharing their time with us today. I am your humble servant and seafood Taoist Master San Qing, and I'll see you in the next one, guys.